Welcome to Taking Stock. I spoke last week about stereotypes and stereotyping. Today I have a follow-up, and it's about unthinking linguistic tics and cliched language. My friends are all scrambling for the off switch or the home button right about now because they think they know precisely what I'm going to say, and they could be at least partially correct. They think I'm going to go off on a rant because of how irritating it is to hear so many people these days begin every single answer to every single question with the word so. Or to hear people use an Australian upward inflection at the end of every sentence, even when it isn't a question. They are wrong. Mostly. Both of those things are still infuriating, that's true. And I will never give up hissing every time I hear one of them, or when I hear one of the latest innovations. British people who use unnecessary Americanisms like change up instead of change round, or 1 through 8 rather than 1 to 8, or who describe something as very fun, which is just wrong and lazy in any language, or those who say I love when or I hate when for generations we've been quite content to remember the word it, which needs to be applied to both of those phrases, I love it or I hate it. And old Etonian politicians who keep saying I get it, in their cut glass accents rather than I understand, in some vain attempt to sound like they are streetwise. And for that matter, don't even start me on middle class kids from leafy suburbia who make desperate attempts to sound like Jay-Z or whatever. Never mind. I'm sure you have already identified the linguistic dinosaur which has burst forth upon your screens. Now, I like to think I'm more thesaurus than tyrannosaurus. And although I might much prefer the word purist myself, I accept that some might prefer pedant. However, my friends are wrong. All those things are minor. Mere pinpricks on the rhino skin, which is the language we use, because whether we like it or not, every living language changes. I refuse to say evolves or develops, because how can you say a language has done either of those things and yet has managed to abandon the use of a delightful Middle English word like overmorrow in favour of the more pragmatic and less poetic the day after tomorrow? I'm reviving overmorrow. Nonetheless, languages do change. They add words, they lose words, they develop words. In Welsh, for example, we have a word for oven, and it is, and always has been, popty. That's why you see so many bakeries in Wales which feature that word in their titles. It means oven. My favourite bakery in North Wales is called Popty Dref, or Town Bakery. Now, when microwave ovens came along, street Welsh speakers couldn't be bothered to wait until Cymdeithas yr Iaith Gymraeg, the Welsh Language Society, to you and me, could decide the proper Welsh exposition of microwave. So they christened the microwave oven with glorious Celtic onomatopoeia, popty ping, for the sound it makes, and thus it will ever be. But it isn't the remaking of language which bothers me so much as the unthinking way in which we say things we have heard others say, use images which others use, without really thinking about what we seem to be saying or inferring by their use. We don't really question our usage or consider what we say or the way we say it, and we don't really wonder about the effect it can have, which is almost diametrically opposite to that which we intended. And we aren't challenged often enough to make us think, what exactly did I mean to say there? Unless we either begin to measure or recommence measuring our own words and own them, we not only lay ourselves open to the charge of a lack of care for others, but we also make ourselves vulnerable to being manipulated into the unthinking adoption of attitudes towards others which, if we don't reflect on them, may lay the foundations of unthinking prejudice. We get groomed, in other words. Misogyny isn't begun by calling a male politician forceful and a female politician strident, but it is certainly facilitated if the language goes unchallenged, whether in print or broadcast media or on the street. Racism doesn't find its genesis in white journalists writing in-depth articles from the comfort of their Islington townhouses being described as brave, whilst articulate black advocates for equality who've been physically and verbally assaulted for speaking the truth to power are regarded as being pushy. But it certainly flourishes beneath so much of the language we allow to go unchallenged. Homophobia may well be the progeny of ignorance and insecurity, but it is nurtured in the bosom of institutions, like the church sadly, when it lets slide the casual cruelty and disregard of our common humanity inherent in such attitudes. And for the sake of what? A spurious peace which papers over the justifiable cracks in the united facade. Our language matters, people. What we say can not only hinder, but can actually hurt. Sticks and stones do break our bones, even when we don't intend to inflict pain, and even more so when the speakers have every intention of breaking hearts, if not bodies. You might wonder what triggered this reflection. Well, it's this. I read an obituary the other day of someone who died a tragic early death from cancer. In it, the deceased was described as having, in inverted commas, succumbed after a brave fight against cancer, close quotes. It was about the millionth time I've read such a description, and it always angers me. Why is it that people fall into the lazy trap of making only cancer, of all the possible illnesses, the only one which is couched in terms of a war or a battle or even a boxing match? Why do cancer patients succumb or lose their brave fight rather than just die like everyone else? I have a form of blood cancer, which is a rarish variety of something called non-Hodgkin lymphoma. I say I have because although I am in remission, I'm not and never will be cured. One day, one indeterminate day, it will return. If successfully treated a second time, I know it will still come back a third time, and maybe a fourth time. I might be fortunate and, like my type 2 diabetes, die with the cancer rather than of the cancer, but I guess there's a good chance that my death certificate will have non-Hodgkin lymphoma as a contributory factor. I'm presuming a secondary cause because I hope the first one will be a massive myocardial infarction received whilst watching Harry Kane's third grandson's winning goal against Arsenal, which secures Tottenham Hotspur's 15th successive Premier League title in 2054. But that's another story. I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin lymphoma in September of 2018. I began 6 months of chemotherapy in October that year. I spent those 6 months doing nothing but being waited on hand and foot by my wife, my family and my friends, whilst periodically being ferried to the hospital and lying back in a high-backed chair watching as they injected me with the highly targeted poisons which hopefully would knock out the cancer in my blood. At no time did I struggle against such treatment. I was not brave. I just let the doctors do their thing. The nearest I got to a battle was with my lovely Arsenal supporting chemotherapy nurse who tried to make me stop wearing Tottenham shirts to treatment sessions. Note, tried. Failed. I was declared in remission in July 2019. It wasn't the cessation of hostilities. It wasn't the end of a war. And if the lymphoma had been incapable of being checked, I would have lost my life, not a battle. Why does this matter? Because to say that someone lost his battle with cancer is to suggest, whether you like it or not, that he could have won. And that, for the overwhelming number of people like me, is just not true. So if, when I hand in my scraper, as my dad would have said, anyone has the gall to use such militaristic language about my death, I solemnly promise that I will, personally, haunt them, frequently. What we say matters, not only because it so often betrays what we really think, but because it so often also displays what we haven't thought to think about, and we need to think. For society to evolve and change, then the vocabulary we employ needs to be changeable, malleable and developable, there's a new word for you, for the one affects the other in a two-way process which drives progress and progressive thought. Stay safe, people.